So, good morning, everybody. I'm Marie Jenkins from Advance Your Wellbeing, and welcome to our second season of The Secret Diary of Marie Jenkins 47 Plus. Now, today I'm super excited because I've got three incredible gentlemen with me, all experts in their own field, both from business and from a housing perspective. So today I'd like to welcome Nick Atkin from Yorkshire Housing. Hi Nick.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, thanks for coming on. I've got Alistair McIntosh from HQN, Housing Quality Network. Morning, Alistair.
Good morning, Millie. We are the pips to your Gladys night. Looking forward to
it. And last but certainly not least, because I'm also privileged to have Alan Clark from Exponential Coaching with us. Hi, Alan.
Good morning, Marie, and thank you for involving me. Thank you very much.
It's fantastic to have you here today, and a complete diverse range of views I'm hoping today from our in conversation with. You've all been previous guests, which I've been really fortunate to interview with. If you want to listen to their previous episodes with us, take a listen to our podcast, because you'll find out a bit more about them in person. I'm just going to give you a brief introduction as to who they are. So firstly, Nick has a track record of leading organisations through transformational change, driving performance improvement with a focus on maximising the untapped potential from business and people. We love that. He's the CEO of Yorkshire Housing, which manages 20,000 homes across the entire Yorkshire geography. I believe you've also got some new properties that have just come online in Hull Road there, Nick. They've got plans to build additional 8,000 homes through a total investment of £1.67 billion. You currently employ 650 people with a turnover of 130 million. He's also a podcaster, and he hosts his own show called Raising the Roof Podcast, which interviews a whole range of fantastic guests from social housing and communities. So that's Nick's bio. Quite impressive there, Nick.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can blag your way into through your career, isn't it? And I do feel like with two Scottish guests alongside me today, I do feel like the type person compared to those Scottish people who are far too generous with their cash, not like us Yorkshire folk.
Marie, as I said earlier, if we could have subtitles for Nick, that'd be much appreciated.
Okay, so on to you, Alistair. Alistair is the CEO at Housing Quality Network, and it was originally set up by Alistair in 1997. He has more than 20 years of providing high quality advice, tailored support and training to the social housing sector. Over the years, they have responded to changes needed for their members, and they provide a range of services from the Housing Quality Network, consultancy support, accreditation, training, events. And my favourite is Alistair's First Things First YouTube channel, which is always insightful. The most recent one was on the parliamentary review of the regulations on social housing. So if you get an opportunity to subscribe to his channel, very informative. You've become a star in your own right on YouTube, Alistair.
Yeah, but Britain's the least viewed YouTube channel, yeah.
And then on to Alan. Alan is the founder of Exponential Coaching. He uses let me get my words out. Innovative transformational coaching and leadership development as a catalyst to help leaders, business owners and entrepreneurs to get clear on their desired level of change and bring that desired level of change to existence. He's also the co-host of a Mind Your Business podcast along with Matt Williams. And the most recent one I listened to was episode 42, I think it was, about the CEO role, which is actually a really fantastic listen. So if you've got aspirations in housing to move on up the ladder, because, you know, we've got to think about succession planning in the future for CEOs because of the demographics there. So, yeah, definitely worth a listen to Alan's podcast, Mind Your Business. So, on to today's episode then. So, the first topic I want to ask you guys about is how can the housing sector continue to innovate? Now, Nick, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I think for me, I think we need to learn from outside the sector. I don't think the answers come from within the housing sector. I think, you know, there are some fantastic examples out there of where other businesses have delivered a great customer experience. The drivers behind it might have been different, but nevertheless, I think there's some real transferable experience. And I'd particularly focus on some of what I'd class as the disruptors. So if you look at the likes of First Direct, you know, the first to really push online banking and that sort of self-serve approach. Tesla, in terms of, you know, how they operate, in terms of how you buy a car, and also the whole process around it, and how you invest in what you know is coming down the line. But also Uber. I always ask the question: if Uber did housing, what would it really look like? And I think we're really starting to see, for the first time, a bit of a threat, really, to our almost monopoly operating system. You know, the emergence of for-profit providers do present, I think, now a threat that we need to look at in terms of our how do we improve our service offer, but also reduce our operating costs. For me, you need to embed innovation as a core value to achieve that, and it needs to be everybody's job. You know, yes, you need to invest in a team that supports this, but they can't be just seen as the go-to people for anything innovative, and everybody else just gets on with doing stuff. Innovation and that creative thinking needs to come from across the business and from all people. And I think also, final thing for me, really, I think we also need to step back and look at the core principles of what the landlord service is and also isn't. At the moment, it's a reactive service, which is completely bonkers. From a customer point of view, it's not a great experience. From an organisational point of view, it's a really clunky and expensive way of delivering this service. And so certainly one of the things that we're looking at the moment, Yorkshire Housing, is how we transform that service from being reactive to being preemptive.
I agree with you there, Nick. And there's always that debate about business versus social purpose in housing. So yeah, I agree. There are lots of efficiencies that can be made from my time of working in social housing. So I agree. Alistair, I'd like to bring you in here. What's your view?
Oh God, I'm just the opposite of Nick, man. I can't assemble any new technology. I'm utterly confused by anything. It's like, I mean, Nick's always lambasted me for my taste in bikes and cars and everything. And what gives me the greatest pleasure, you go on eBay now, an old Ford Escort with windy up windows and proper carburetors now cost more than a Tesla. And that makes me feel finally vindicated, yeah? But I think technology comes and goes and it contorts, yeah? It's all about who's driving it or using it. And isn't it fascinating that with the onset of cameras and monitoring and everything else, we all thought, or many of us thought, this would be a great way of looking at the estates, cutting costs, using drones, etc. And yet the camera in the hands of a young man called Quadjo in South London has produced enormous pressure on the industry. Yeah, it's kind of turned the thing back on itself. And I think that technology is fine. You can't always predict which technology is going to work, which competitor is going to work. I mean, many years ago, I was once the future. I was a disruptor when the Nationwide tried to enter the private rented sector. That got nowhere. But the key thing is that the customer has to be king. The customer has to be driving it. And we need to get that reflex into the organisation. I know that's what I would laugh and joke with Nick about new technology, but ultimately he's about giving the customer power, and I think that's definitely the direction we have to go.
I'd agree with you there, Alistair. It has to be the customer at the heart of what you do. But for me, innovation isn't just about technology. It's about process. It's about people and empowering people. And Alan, I want to bring you in on that, because ultimately our people are our most valued assets. So from your perspective, in social housing as a sector, how can they innovate and make sure that their people are at the heart of what they do you think?
I think it's a great question. I think when it always comes to people and change and innovation and progress, for me, the absolute key skill is listening, really genuinely listening. I agree with Alistair and Nick, that listening to what customers are wanting, but when it comes to people maybe internal in this sector, absolutely listening, number one. And, that is a skill that is still remarkably rare and relatively easy to progress once we really focus on it. So that's how I would answer that for a starter of 10, Marie.
Yeah, I agree. And I was fortunate. I worked in a housing association that was very good at listening and innovating on people's ideas and creativity. But I know there's a huge spectrum in housing associations, and some that are really forward thinking, which I believe Nick is sort of at the helm of at Yorkshire Housing in terms of how they work and empowering and looking at work-home life balance. But I also am aware that that spectrum is very wide and there's still a long way to go for some organisations. So yeah, I agree with you there completely. Fantastic, really enjoyed that. Can I ask you another question based on the fact that Nick at Yorkshire Housing have just had more properties come online? I'm interested in terms of where do you think communities and estates are going? Do you think they're going to look the same? Say, what, 2050? Alistair, I'm coming to you.
Yeah, that is a really good question, and it brings so many things together, doesn't it? I live in Camden, huge battle between the tenants associations and the councils at the moment about the future shape of estates. Do you refurbish? Do you regenerate? Do you bring extra properties in? It's there's no easy right or wrong there. I did a session with some Welsh associations the other day, and Alan will be pleased to hear this. The Welsh government's pushing this whole idea you should listen, hear and act. So they're in the same wavelength as you. But I spoke to their Future Generations Commissioner, and I said, you'll be lucky to have a job in 10 years' time, because the birth rate in Wales is the lowest in the developed world, and the birth rate generally is going down. A whole variety of reasons, including the fact that people are in insecure accommodation. So I think who lives in the properties? Are they older? Are they childless? That will be influential. Will we still have Teslas or cars? Will we have some other form of, but not forgetting that since I was born, cars have increased in size by a third, yeah? So they're very dominant in terms of how you design areas. On top of that, fire safety, quality, the desire to, the property I live in, I bought from a housing association. The housing association developed it and sold it in order to pay for the refurbishment of shelter accommodation next door, yeah? But anyone looking at it would think it was a one seamless development, very attractive, etc., etc. So the looks are important, the eco aspect's important, but who we're housing, I think, is absolutely critical in terms of class, generation, etc. So that's my piece on it, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We've got a lady called Lisa Richards that's going to be coming up on a Future Housing Week podcast, and she's an urban designer. And the look and feel of an estate can completely change an atmosphere, I believe. And that is something that I think we'll be looking at a lot more. Alan, you've moved around a lot. You're now based in Worcestershire. And obviously, as we alluded to earlier, you're a Scotsman. You moved around a lot during your rep times at Boots. What do you think from an estate perspective? What do you think it'll look like 2050?
I don't know exactly how it would look like, but what I'd love to be considered big style is the environmental concerns. You know, as we go into the second half of 21st century, I think for the first time ever, the human race is genuinely facing huge issues regarding the environment and sustainability. And you know, I was thinking of this podcast. Well, of course I was, but when I was sort of getting some ideas flowing, I think that will really shape how houses will look and communities will look. And I think it should. I think that should be a huge factor. So not sure what that might be. More shared resources, Marie. I'm not quite sure, but I think a definite environmental answer in housing and communities would be awesome.
I'd agree. And to be fair, that's a great point to go to Nick, because obviously they've been doing some incredible work in this space in terms of sustainability in their home building, etc. Nick, what's your view?
Well, in answering your question, Marie, my headline response would be, I hope not. I hope that we've made quite a lot of changes between now and 2050. I think the key point here for me is that I fundamentally believe we are living at the moment, right now, in a revolution in how we both live and work. And I think that has been sort of, that's happened as a result of the pandemic. But I just think that's supercharged some of the things that were bubbling under the surface. And so, you know, in terms of picking up on what Alan said, you know, suddenly things that were taken for granted or indeed removed, things like communal space, things like, you know, space, green space, space in your home, all those sorts of things have now become really, really important to people. And I think, you know, we've seen some movement in the housing market as a result of that, but also we're seeing some changes in investment plans. But that revolution has still got to permeate through in terms of the impact. And I think we'll see that over the next 2 to 5 years. I think definitely moving forward, you know, the importance of low carbon homes and also sustainable ways of living and working and traveling. I think for many people, they were probably almost ignored at the start of this decade. I think they've definitely come now right up most people's sort of consciousness. And I think that then leads to, bearing in mind what I've said before about us living through this revolution and how we live and work, again, I think we're going to see those communities and estates change in response to the rise of the 20-minute neighbourhood. And I think, you know, you will start to see some of the things that are currently in town and city centres starting to emerge in some of those more localised communities. And also, you know, if you look at what's happening in terms of for, you know, for many employers, you look at what's happening in some other parts of Europe, in Sweden, for example, where, you know, they're looking at the 4-day working week, which I know for Alistair will be a shock, you know, having to work 4 days. But you know, it is that whole sort of change that we are living through now. What we are living through now, our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will study and look back on and go, wow, that must have been an amazing period to live through. And then I think the final thing is, you know, there's a clear shift as well in recognition of the fact that there's probably been too much inequality in terms of where investment goes. And it certainly in housing terms, the investment over the last 10 years has all been focused on new supply. And I think what we've got with levelling up is a recognition, actually, it's not just about new supply. It's also about ensuring we have the right homes in the right place for the right communities. Yeah. And in some cases, that means we've got to change some of what's there at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I certainly agree with what you're saying about the work-home life balance side, and the 20-minute neighbourhood, that's a new term. So I'm going to have to go and learn and swat up a bit about what that looks like, Nick. But in terms of the 4-day week, I heard that just this morning, actually, that Friday is the new Saturday. So who knows, but it will certainly change. I think, considering all the things that we've spoken about today, sustainability is definitely going to be up there.
But Marie, can I maybe just ask a question? You know, I agree with everything we're saying about eco and all the rest of it, but Nigel Farage is pushing against net zero. He's pushing for referenda on it. We've got this desire to have energy security. Thatcher, Blair, Cameron all gave up on the green agenda. Will it go the distance this time?
We will wait and see. We will wait and see.
I think, Alistair, there's an unstoppable momentum now. I think, maybe there was previously a generational split. I think that's been eroded now. I think the evidence is clearly there that we all have a responsibility to address the problem that's the danger that's very clear and present. I think there's no way around it. I think we haven't done enough, going back to Marie's question about communities and estate, on micro generation. So I think we will probably end up revisiting that in terms of how we can do more with homes, and also do things like cars. So there's a new car maker coming out of America, and the car battery is designed to also power your home. So it's a really interesting mix in terms of how you use power in a much more fluid way.
Yeah, Alan, I saw you had your hand up there. Do you want to chip in?
Yeah, no, it was Alistair. I think that was a brilliant challenge, actually. But I am more with Nick there in terms of response. But when Nick was saying earlier about looking externally to some of the great innovators at the moment, like Tesla, their purpose / mission statement is to sort of champion the change to a more sustainable world or something like that. It's not specifically electrical vehicles, it's more on that. So I agree with Nick there. I think the momentum is such now that it's inevitable that we'll be innovating in this space, including housing.
Well, it's your home is house is your home, and everything that goes around that is wrapped around that, be it how you get to work, where you work, what you're driving, all of those things. So they all impact. But fascinating. We will see. Hopefully we'll all be around in 2050. Who knows?
Not according to the health statistics for the west of Scotland. I think Alan and I will be well gone by then. Yeah.
Is that why you moved to Camden?
Well, interestingly, this is a kind of eco house, and back to your point, Nick. I mean, the bill was 40 a month. It's going to go up to 60 a month for a reasonably sized family home. So it's amazing what you can achieve with insulation and just a few little eco adjustments. So it's important stuff, yeah.
And that's very topical at the moment, isn't it, in terms of the energy and the current situation that we're in. So I agree with you there, Alistair. All right, on to our next topic. And this is about attracting the best talent into the sector. Now, I was very fortunate to fall into housing, if you like, as I find when I speak to other professionals, that was the same thing for them. It isn't always the top of the list careers to choose to go and work in social housing, but it has that, how can I say, draw that once you're in it, you tend to stay in it because it's so multifaceted. How can we attract the next talent into the sector, Nick? Big question.
I mean, right. I think the challenge has got harder. So if you look at the latest stats are showing, depending on which ones you believe, approximately 1.2 million vacancies in the UK job market. So I certainly in my whole career have never known that level of vacancies. So I think for employers, it's about how do you make yourself attractive. And I think housing's got a great story to tell. I think we probably need to make more of the social purpose of what we do, because that's increasingly important to the generation, particularly who are now entering the workplace. I've got 3 kids, they're all hard work, but I see what's important to them, and interestingly, they will only work for ethical companies and businesses. It's really, really important for them, and I think we probably don't make enough of that in terms of the attraction of a career in the housing sector. Because you're right, Marie, once you are in there, it's pretty much impossible to get out again, because it does sort of get in your blood. I think the other thing that I think we need to do, and I think I've been speaking to quite a few recruitment consultants post-pandemic, and really interesting that they're saying that flexibility of when people work and where people work is now as important as salary. And so certainly at Yorkshire Housing, we've implemented an approach called Hub, Home and Roam. All of our colleagues are on home-based contracts. And I think that, certainly we're finding that that's enabling us to recruit to roles that have been previously very difficult by being much more flexible around where people work. So for example, we've taken on people who live in Amsterdam. We've had one of our finance team in Brazil. We've taken people on in Norwich.
Wow.
Alan and Alistair will be delighted to hear that we've got a couple of colleagues in Edinburgh.
Norwich, how exotic!
Well, we've two colleagues in Edinburgh and London as well. I have to say though, Marie, as a Yorkshire organisation, we do draw the line at Lancashire. We have a filtering system which is anybody from Lancashire. We're not having any of them in.
Wallace and Gromit, that big debate.
But I think it is about that. It's also about retention. So how do you keep really good people? How do you create those career opportunities? But also how do you make the working offer so good in terms of that flexibility of work being something you do, not somewhere you go, and that you don't have to be in work to be in work. So that enables you to not only recruit but also retain really good people. And we've had a couple of instances quite recently where people have left us for more money, but actually have absolutely balked at the working environment, what I call BC working environment before COVID, and they've come back to us. Interestingly,
Oh,
you know what? Can't cope with working, as a battery chicken 5 days a week in a 1980s office environment. They basically said that's not for them. And I think, again, it goes back to my point before. I think genuinely we are living through a revolution in how people live and work. And I think employers need to catch up with that.
Yeah, I agree. Alan, I want to come to you on this, because in terms of like attracting talents, what are the sort of things that in your view as a coach, what can they do in terms of attracting those talents?
I think one of the most effective things is to inspire people about wanting to use their time for a purpose, for a cause, and that gets right at the level of spirit. So I think I'm getting a reaction here, so that's good. That's good. But yeah, I would certainly start in that space. How can we really communicate the cause, the purpose, and get really people fired up about wanting to give their professional career to the cause? And you can do that in loads of things like podcasts, can't you? Social media, all sorts of channels, as well as, traditional adverts, etc. But yeah, let's get the purpose and let's really inspire people about giving their professional career over to housing and the challenges it faces, and excel the exciting stuff and opportunities too.
Absolutely, and there's some incredible work that goes on in the sector, Alan. There really is. I mean, it's fantastic. Alistair, how about you? What's your views on talent?
Well, I was laughing at Nick's story about people leaving and coming back. We had a young lad working for us a couple of years ago. He's proper Jack the Lad kind of character, yeah? So he left us to get a company car. He's only a rep for Young's out in Scarborough and Hull and all that. And he did get his company car. Unfortunately, the big giant lobster painted on it. So his adventure with Jack the Lad didn't go quite according to plan. But I do think that we're actually going to not find it at all hard to compete for talent, subject to the constraints that Nick made about the general economic position. Because you switch on ITV, anyone worth their salt looks at those cases and says, do you know what? I want to get in there and sort that sector out, yeah? So I think some fantastic, determined, up and at 'em type characters, yeah? Darkest Hour, One Before Dawn, I think Daniel Quadro, they've done us a favour with those programmes.
Yeah.
And the word I had written down here, Alan, was excitement, yeah? Now, I arrived at Camden shortly after the big expansion of housing under the Director of Planning, Director of Architecture, Cook. And the atmosphere was fantastic. All the best young architects were working there. They were building innovative estates. They were sticking it to the government on the cost yardstick. It was just a brilliant, fantastic atmosphere. Not everything they built has stood the test of time. I recognise Nick's remark about some estates have to come down, but we need a flag to rally round, yeah?
Yeah.
So at the certain point, I don't quite know how to do it, but that's the one to go for, yeah?
Yeah.
We certainly know what not to do. There's a great book by Polly Curtis called Behind Closed Doors. It's about failures in social work at the moment, yeah? And there's 2 points I just want to make, yeah? One is that people aren't leaving social work because of the pay. They can put up with that. What they can't stand is the dysfunctional management, all these rules and regulations, and they can't stand that some of the social workers are able to lie and get away with not doing their jobs properly, yeah? So all those things are there. And the second point, which I think is very, very important, is that what this person argues is that we need to look at the strengths of families, not focus constantly on their failures. Big message for housing, yeah? There's fantastic people on these estates. If you can't get good resident engagement when you've got the thousands of people that Nick and all the rest of them have got, then we've got the problem, not the rest. I know Nick accepts that, but I'm just using the statistics as an example. So I think we do need to cherish, love and value more the residents, and we need to build more with love and care, and that's what we used to do in the past. We need to get back to it.
Yeah, I agree. We do need to get back to it, but what I'd also say is there's some really incredible innovation that's going on in housing, and Nick's Raising the Roof podcast is a prime example, and you with your YouTube channel, thinking outside the box, bringing innovation, raising awareness, having those conversations with tenants, you know, in ways that's more suited to them from the traditional phone and email. I mean, these are incredible innovations, but guys, we're at that time, so I'd like to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been some interesting conversations and perspectives, so I thank you for that. Details on how to get in touch with Alistair, Alan and Nick will be in the show notes. So thank you for joining me today, guys.
Thanks for asking us,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. All the best.
Bye.